Everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. So presenting today to discuss the EPA herbicide strategy and ESA mitigation and what this means for you and all future pesticide registrations is Dr. Stanley Culpepper, who is an extension weed scientist with the University of Georgia. Dr. Culpepper has spoken on this topic many times, and I think we can at this point consider him an expert. And so thank you very much for taking the time to present on this topic today. Following Dr. Culpepper's presentation, Dr. Gary Schmitz with BASF will cover the mitigation requirements for Liberty Ultra. We will reserve some time at the end to address as many questions as we can. So if you have a question, please feel free to submit it in the panel that you'll find on the right of your screen. And as I mentioned, we'll cover as many of those questions as possible with the time remaining here this morning. So with that, please welcome Dr. Culpepper, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Certainly a pleasure to be here. Just a little quick background so I can kind of set up my perspective of my presentation this morning. I am actually from a bicentennial family farm. We've been in production 252 years, so I'm really proud of that. I'm a wolf packer, got all my degrees from NC State and agriculture, of course, planning to go back to the farm until I decided to go to the University of Georgia, and I've been here the last 25 years, and I developed weed management programs for about 45 different cropping systems. So let's be very clear, I am not a regulatory expert whatsoever, but somehow, I've gotten into this space to try to protect the tools in the toolbox for our family farms. And I am going to talk today about family farms, the Endangered Species Act, and the environment. Now, you're going to see throughout my presentation, I think, three main topics that keep reappearing. Flexibility, which we have gained a lot in the last year to year and a half on the herbicide strategy. You're going to hear me talk about outreach. I am an extension. That is what I do. I love working with growers and family farms. The education of the Endangered Species Act is, of course, quite complex. We're going to try to simplify that for you. And then we're going to talk about improvements, species mapping improvements, mitigation improvements, etc. So that's kind of my theme, and that's what I'm going to get into. But I do want to take just a second. We've got so many dynamic people on the call, different backgrounds. So let's just take just a second for an introduction and remind you the Endangered Species Act was basically implemented over 50 years ago. The framework to conserve and protect endangered and threatened species and their habitats is something we on the family farm, we in agriculture, of course, support. We were, of course, caught off guard a few years ago when we faced the potential loss of many of our tools to court decisions, when in essence, the EPA had not followed some of the guidelines within the Endangered Species Act when they registered pesticides. We are fortunate that the EPA responded very quickly to some of those court decisions. Unfortunately, at least at that time, the EPA responded very aggressively. And from my perspective, some of the regulations or the approaches to address those court decisions were overwhelming. And in fact, what they did is their overwhelming regulations potentially challenged our toolbox as well. I'll support that statement by bringing your attention to the draft herbicide strategy that came out in July of 2023. Again, my opinion, but if the information in this document had come into fact or had influenced the labeling process, our family farm, and I think most of your family farms, whether you're part of a family farm or you work on a family farm, we would have been in serious trouble and probably eliminated our production. So it was very serious. And what is so ironic to me is this document would have destroyed, again, our family farm. But when you destroy our family farm, you destroy the habitat of the species you're trying to protect. So you destroy us, you destroy the species, and ironically, you haven't protected anybody. And we've jeopardized the ability of our country to produce food, feed, and fiber for a growing population, right? So I think it was very serious, about a year and a half ago. Now, let me be very clear. The scientists at the EPA, I am so blessed to get to work with some of those individuals. They are fantastic. Their goal in ESA and everything else they do is no different than mine. And that's to ensure pesticides are applied on target and remain there, no doubt about it. Just in my opinion, they missed with the draft strategy. We are so fortunate in agriculture to have so many amazing agriculture stakeholders that stood behind us, having very in-depth discussions with our regulatory partners about how the proposed strategy simply was not a workable solution to protect the family farm and to protect the species, which again, I see as one unit, right? Many stakeholders across the country stood up for us. They fought for us. They brought the attention to our regulatory partners. Our regulatory partners could have said, hey, that's your problem. You're going to have to deal with it. But they didn't. They did the exact opposite. Their effort to get out and to understand the farm, what we do on the farm, how we do it, why we cherish those tools, how we steward those tools, the effort that they have put in is absolutely monumental. And they certainly deserve credit for taking that approach. Also, what they deserve credit for is the movement in their decision making to be based on sound science, and more sound science had been generated. They took that science very quickly and they let that influence the evolution of that herbicide strategy. So again, their effort to get out, to understand, to engage was priceless. Personally, in the state of Georgia, I got to watch something that was amazing. I got to watch regulators visiting with my farmers, gaining complete respect for them for what they're doing. And at the same time, my farmers gain respect for these regulators as they gain knowledge of how complex this is and how there's no simple solution and how important it is we have to work together. So to me, this was a changing point of where we're at. And what you saw, I call it the final strategy. They do not, but I call it the final strategy, but I do that to make the point that it's not final. It is changing nonstop. We are going to work to improve the process, but in comparison to the draft strategy, the final strategy, we're still in the game on the farm. And I'm going to show you that. Hopefully you read Final Herbicide Strategy. It's a whole lot shorter than the draft strategy, only 400 or 500 pages of complex terminology. But what you would see is a lot more flexibility with runoff mitigation options, a lot more flexibilities with potential buffers, downwind buffers. But if you paid attention while you were reading that, or you've been seeing different presentations, what you also notice is a direct correlation with increased complexity. So to get that flexibility, we absolutely had to have on the farm to remain sustainable. There is an increase in the complexity. Part of that increase in complexity is now we have to make decisions by the field, not the farm. Think about how many fields there are in our country, right? That is a monumental task. The decision will be influenced by the product and the crop that we're growing in that field. So in essence, we have, in my personal opinion, it is challenging, but this process provides us an opportunity to do our own risk assessment at the field. Now, I actually tell my farmers that, and then I follow with, would you rather us work together to do the risk assessment at your field, which I think eventually we will be quite good, or would you rather a regulatory partner do a one-size-fits-all across the country, right? So my opinion is I appreciate the opportunity for the flexibility. I hate the complexity, but there are potential solutions. So if you're a farmer or you're a consultant or you're somebody like me, I apply pesticides, I recommend pesticides. There's three big changes that we have to become comfortable with as products are registered or re-registered through our regulatory partners. You know, we have to be comfortable with runoff requirements that we have to meet. We have to be comfortable with understanding particle drift buffers, downwind buffers, different requirements, but depending on application methods, depending on different products. And then we have to be more comfortable. BLT is not new to most of us because there are a lot of us that have been applying in-crop dicambas for many years, and BLT was part of that registration or labeling process. But we have to put more of an effort into understanding BLT, how to get to Bulletin's Live 2, how to understand if we have additional pesticide use limitation areas. So they're the three big changes that I think are super important, especially if you're on the ground, on the farm, at the field level, and we have to make decisions. Now, kind of the same concept, but just kind of laying it out a little bit differently. So for runoff, we'll look on a label. You're going to get an example of the Liberty Ultra label in a little bit, but it is proposed that our runoff requirements will be somewhere between 0 and 9. So each of our pesticides potentially would have a number value tied to it that correlates with its likelihood of moving off target through runoff. All right, so if it's a 9, that's a product that's very likely to move off target. If it's a lower number, it's less likely. So that's something you and I will have to check on each label moving forward. Then, of course, we would have to check for buffers. Now, my example here, you'll see my range is from 0 to 230 feet, and below that, I show drift. I am going to focus my example today on a ground application. If you have aerial application, you have air blast application, you have to look at it differently, okay? I am focusing on ground because I am a herbicide guy, and I desperately want you to put your herbicides out with a ground application equipment, right? So the range that's proposed so far in herbicide strategy is that buffer will be somewhere between 0 and 230 feet. So we've got to address that. And then that third area, BLT, again, is important because we need to see if we're in that pesticide use limitation area. It may increase our points for runoff. So let's give you an example. Culpepper Farms may not be in a pooler. I may have a 3 runoff of a certain product. You may be my neighbor, but you're in a pooler. You may have a 4, 5, or 6, right? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that is, but you could increase the points for runoff because you need additional protections of a species that's near you. Drift buffers can also increase. We've seen this before on the in-crop dicamba products. We had a 240 downwind in a non-ESA county. We had 310 plus 57 in an ESA county. That is essentially what you got from that. I do want to share one last potential concern, but I want to stress to you, do not take this as the message home. There is a potential for that pooler to remove the tool. But again, I want to stress to you, let folks like myself, let the manufacturers, let the regulatory partners work on that. And I'll give you an example. You're going to get a better example in a minute, but the Liberty Ultra label, the Enlist Duo label, and the Enlist One label in the state of Georgia, I'll highlight this area right in here that I've got yellow. That is an avoidance area. I cannot apply any of those products in that area because I have one of the most vulnerable 27 species, and it's this world sunflower. So again, I don't want you leaving here thinking this is a major problem for you to worry about. Let people like myself, Fish and Wildlife, the EPA, and our cooperators try to come up with a better approach or a better solution. Again, this is not finalized. We're going to improve the process. We're going to work together, but you need to be aware that this is part of the discussion. All right, so I want to scare you, and then I'm going to help you simplify the process. And this is actually real data. It took about 2 weeks to generate this data, but I wanted to know how many decisions will you and I have to make on the farm. And I'm assuming the future is here and all of our pesticides have runoff restrictions, buffer restrictions, and we have to check BLT. So we're looking into the future, but I'm using the programs of 2024 on 2 farms to show you how complex it can be. So Culpepper Farms is in northeastern North Carolina. We grow 5 agronomic crops and have 40 fields. This year or last year, 2024, we applied 30 pesticide active ingredients. Based on tank mixtures and everything we did just right, I would have to check the labels 372 runoff calculations and 372 drift buffer calculations. And don't forget, I'd have to check the pool. All right, that seems like a lot. However, we are a tiny farm. If you look at a more dynamic farm in South Georgia in red, you see 26 unique vegetables and agronomic crops. They have 16 agronomic fields, 372 vegetable fields. Now, let me clarify this. A vegetable field, and I've got in quotes, we can grow 3 crops per year. Remember, I told you this is influenced by the field, the crop, and the products you use. So if I do a tomato crop in the spring, I do a squash crop in the early fall, and then I do a cabbage crop after that. That's 3 different fields I would have to check each year or each time. So there's 78 pesticide active ingredients that are used on this farm. There are over 4,000 calculations. 4,000 calculations for runoff, 4,000 calculations for drift buffers based on actual products that they apply in mixtures, etc. So, my question to you, whether you're a regulator, whether you're a farmer, I focus more on farmers, who the heck can do that on the farm, right? We have to simplify the process, and that's really what we are doing, and I'm working so hard to try to accomplish here in the state of Georgia and share with individuals like you. I will stress to you, if you are a farmer, you are not alone. I will challenge my co-advisors, extension consultants, retailers, manufacturers, and in the state of Georgia, Department of Agriculture is hand in hand with the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension. We are here to help you. We still have a lot to learn, so give us time, but we are here to help you learn the process and overcome the process, and in my opinion, most importantly, simplify the process while doing what? Exactly what we want to do on the farm, put the product on target and keep it there. That's what every single one of us wants. We'd appreciate help accomplishing that goal as long as it's not overly restrictive and does not hurt our economic, cause an economic burden for our operations. So in the state of Georgia, what we're doing, my objective is to get every grower in my state to 9 points for all fields overcoming runoff mitigations. I want to get to 9 points for several reasons. Number one, I want to get to 9 points so we don't have to check 4,000 labels all the time. That is just too much. It's too overwhelming. If I get you to 9 points, that is the worst that is proposed. If the EPA doesn't move the goalpost, then I have you covered on that 9 points. But equally important, in my region, this may not work for your region, but in my region, if I can get my growers to 9 points, I feel comfortable based on science that product does not leave that field. That is important to us. We do not want these products in the ponds where our kids or our grandkids are playing. We want that product to stay on target. If I get my folks to 9, I'll be honest with you, most of my folks are already doing the right things. A few of them we need to help get a few more points. All right, so that's objective 1. Objective 2, I want to help my growers. I'm going to use the ground rig application as an example. I want to help my growers take that 230-foot drift down to near zero. It is critical to point out, there's no way we can feed you, clothe you, provide fiber. There's no way we can do that if we can't produce and control the pest in our entire fields. We're losing hundreds of acres of land every single hour. We cannot give up land in the field. So this is critical to help our growers take that 230 foot down. What also goes along with that? If we use the right methods to reduce that buffer from 230 foot down to hopefully zero, you know what we do? We improve application measures to keep the product on target. That's important. Number 3, the most important thing to me right now is I want input from my growers. What works with our ideas, what doesn't work? Growers are the smartest dang people on planet Earth. They are giving us ideas every single day that we do a meeting. We can take that, we can organize it, and we can share it with our partners to improve the process. Improve the process is a mission for us. All right, so if you were in the state of Georgia yesterday, I did 3 county meetings. That's what we do in this part of the world. I match my approach depending on who you are sitting in the room, right? If I'm at a vegetable meeting and it's plasticulture, I have one approach. If it's bare ground vegetables, I have a different approach. If it's agronomic, I have an agronomic approach. I'm gonna give you an agronomic example of what we're doing. And what I always tell my growers, pretend you're let's say you're in Camilla, Georgia yesterday, you're sitting at the county meeting with my farmers. The first thing I'd say is I want you to think about one field. Now we've got to address all your fields, so let's be clear, but right now we got to start, let's drink from the water hose, not the fire hydrant, right? So think about one field. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hand out a sheet of mitigation measures. We're gonna do runoff first, we'll do drift next, but we're gonna address runoff. Now my approach is only successful if I understand what my growers are doing, because what I am doing is I'm simplifying the process. This sheet or this table that you see on the slide, if you look on the table down here with this grower, he has the same thing. So I have passed this out for the growers to do a workshop, right? Now there are over 40 different options available for runoff mitigation, all right? I have picked the 11 that I think I can get most of my growers to 9 points on, all right? They don't care about hearing about those mitigation options that aren't relevant to their operation, right? This has got to be simple, it's got to be to the point. All right, so I take those 11, they have a worksheet, we're working through it. Now, this is really important. My very first meeting, one of my old county agents says, man, you're going through this stuff, or you're just making this up. Oh, absolutely not. When it comes to runoff, I will challenge you just like I challenged our county agents. If you will spend 1 hour on the US EPA's calculator, you will be an expert. That calculator is fantastic. Yes, it provides you the mitigation options. Yes, it provides you the points that are relative to that mitigation option, but more importantly, it provides you a link to the definitions. That is the key to becoming knowledgeable in this process. I often tell my folks, advisors, it's absolutely essential. I've got about 80 county agents now that are experts on the calculator. They can handle this at the local level. I'm gonna be honest, my dad's not gonna pull up no Excel calculator. It's not gonna happen. Most of my farmers are not gonna pull it up. But I had 2 farmers last night say, send me that calculator. I wanna become an expert. So it's gonna be available for our farmers as well, but we will absolutely help in the process. But this calculator is jam up. It is from the US EPA. You want to get comfortable with this approach, and keep in mind, just like everything else, the calculator is going to improve. It's going to improve in time to be more helpful. All right, so when we're sitting at the meeting, the first thing I'm going to do, I know what county you're in, so I'm going to start with mitigation relief points. This is basically assigned by the EPA in the final herbicide strategy. Depending on the county you're sitting in, you get so many points. My guys do not care how many points you're getting in Illinois. I'm sorry, that's important to you. We don't care. We care about yesterday, Mitchell County, Georgia. Mitchell County, Georgia, yesterday, you got 2 points, right? That's what was happening. Then I'll kind of go through each of these. It's important for you to understand you and I don't get to make up the definitions of what we think it is, right? Here's an example from the calculator, tells you exactly what the definition is for your sand, loamy sand, or sandy loam to get 2 points. I will give so much credit to our regulatory partners. They have asked for input on the definitions. They've asked for input on science. They have respected our input. It has been a pleasure to work with them. So with that said, if we missed on something, a mitigation measure that you don't understand or you think's wrong, please reach out to us. They have done nothing but welcomed our suggestions on any part of this process. They want to get this right. Their scientists are as committed as I am and my colleagues. So again, keep that in mind. We don't get to pick the definition, but if we got something wrong or something's wrong in the calculator definitions, provide the feedback. Because I believe we'll get it right. I want to share one last example. If you'll remember, in proposed herbicide strategy cover crops, we basically were getting 1 point no matter what you did. This is how cool we added so much flexibility. It's more complex because now you have 3 potential options, but that's a good kind of complexity. In my part of the world, every single grower is a long duration cover crop producer. I'm going to get 3 points. This is wonderful. We have so much data that shows cover crop residue has a tremendous influence in reducing the movement of pesticides out of the field, right? They gave us credit for that. It was wonderful. All right, now I'm not going to go through the rest of them. You get the concept. It takes me about 12 minutes in the meeting. And then when I get done with runoff, I say, hey guys, do you have 9 points? I also survey my guys, but I say, if you do not have 9 points, I want to talk to you after my meeting. The reason I want to talk to you after the meeting, again, I told you this is only 11 mitigation measures. There's over 40 in the calculator. I've got a lot of things in my back pocket. I just kind of don't want to use them on everybody. If I need to help 5% of my growers, let's do it. But I don't want to have to deal with everything. It gets complicated. Here's just some extra examples that'll work for my growers. You'll see number 2, there's expert. I could be their expert. They don't want me to be their expert because I'm a pain in the rear end, right? But there are different opportunities for us to take growers that are maybe a 6 or 7 and work it through. And I will tell you, it will be influenced by production practice. There's no doubt. There are areas that need more help, and it's important that we identify that and we continue to bring the science to the game. Now, one thing I want to point out, a lot of growers are concerned about, I have a lot of fields. Do I have to do a form for each field? Do I have to track every field? Let me give you an example of what I've done for Culpepper Farms in North Carolina. I'm the consultant, not a very good consultant, but I have this covered as long as the EPA doesn't move the goalpost for the next 15 years. We have 40 fields. We have them numbered on our maps. Maps 1 through 36, these mitigation measures work for me. I clearly exceed 9. The other 4 fields are a little bit different because I don't have waterways and I don't get multiple category mitigation. But 2 sheets of paper, I can cover all 40. And some of you guys have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. A little bit more complicated, but you need to think about how you can group it and simplify the process over this year. We have time, but you need to start thinking about how are you going to do that? How are you going to document it? How you can provide that information if someone shows up and you have to produce it. All right, let me take just a minute and switch gears with you. We just did runoff. I'm excited with what I'm learning in my counties. I want, again, to help my growers achieve exactly what they want. That's to put these products on target and keep them there. That makes us money, right? That is what we want to do, but we've got to do it in a way that does not overly economically burden the process. That is not acceptable. Our family farms are so stressed right now. It breaks my heart, the number of family farms that we're losing. So we have to work together to take the burden off the farm and help them achieve the goal of putting the product on target, keeping it there, improving pest control, and improving sustainability of these tools. All right. Switching to how do we deal with drift, the drift restrictions or potential restrictions on labels coming through registration. All right, again, I'm using the ground rig. I can't stress enough. I don't want you to leave here and think, oh, the worst case scenario is 230. This is for the ground rig. Aerial is different. So if you're an aerial applicator, you got to go study it. When we started this process, I thought this was going to put us out of the game. If you look on the left-hand side, we can tell you what kind of impact you're going to have if you take parts of our field out. It is absolutely not sustainable at all. So what we have to do is be creative and take these potential buffers down to something realistic. And what I'm doing with my growers is I'm taking 230, because that should be the worst case scenario if the EPA doesn't move the goalpost, and we're going to get that down to something that we can live with in the field. And again, I'm going to give the EPA credit where they deserve it. They absolutely got it perfectly right with where they start the process of giving us credits or opportunity to reduce the buffer. All right, number one is boom height. Boom height, boom height, boom height. Number two is droplet size. They got it exactly right. All right. So if you look across the top, if you have a low boom coarse droplets, you can reduce that number 75%. Right. So if we just do a low boom and coarse droplet, we have a product that has a worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario of 230 feet. I think you'll have to check me on the map, but I think that takes us down to about around 58 feet just by doing those two things that, guess what, we should do anyway. All right, the only exceptions, that coarse droplets. I can think of two herbicides I'd like to have a medium droplet. One of them is going to be discussed a little bit later, and another one's paraquat. All right, but other than that, every other product that I am thinking in my world, we can do low boom and coarse droplets. All right, so that's something to keep in mind. I just want to share this data. This is my data out of the state of Georgia that supports exactly what the EPA did. I am showing you how far a pesticide drift in the field, real world, the way we do it on the farm. You're looking in the red bars with medium droplets, and look at the difference in boom height. You got 48 inches. We could detect drift of that product 188 feet. When you drop that boom down to 24 inches, you cut that basically in half. If you move over to the right part of the slide with the ultra coarse droplets, again, you see what the droplet did. Look at 48 inches of yellow versus red. That's what the droplet did. Droplet size, increasing that size, you increase the weight, you get it to the ground, it doesn't move off target, right? That's important. But again, look at what boom height did. We basically cut the drift in half. All right, so the EPA got this part right, and we need to appreciate and respect the fact that they're giving us significant credit for the opportunities to do this. Now, again, this is proposed in herbicide strategy. If you look toward the bottom, the DRA, we got to do more work here. Which products? What's the volume? We got more to do. But the potential here is to get 15 to 30% reduction with the DRA. And if you're in my part of the world where 60% humidity would be so relieving, right? We're at 98, we get a 10% credit. So let me just use my guys for an example. I want their boom at 24 inches. Other than two products, I want coarse droplets. A lot of times it's their option if they want a DRA or not, but if they add the DRA in, they do relative humidity. I add that up, I get 100%. 100% reduction of 230 feet is how much? All right, I think we can live with that. But again, if I have a grower that doesn't want to add a DRA in a product, it's not required. We don't have to add it. I don't want them to spend a penny that they don't want to spend. So there are lots of other options. We have to thank the EPA in the draft herbicide strategy, the hooded spray credit, not there. The lay-by rig credit, not there. It got added in the final or our latest herbicide strategy. Broadcast hooded spray, it's there. Look at the credit that you can receive. I do want to point out rate of product. This is important. You do not reduce the rate of the product that you need to develop a sound management program, a sound resistance management program. No one is suggesting that you reduce the rate of the product below what it needs to be. But there are a lot of times where we do not use the maximum amount of the product. I'll give you an example. You guys are probably all familiar with Reflex Fomesafen. We use it on cotton. We put it pre-emergence. My use rate can be at 24 ounces in a single application. I at most use 12 ounces because it'll kill my cotton. All right. In that scenario, we can get credit. The EPA is allowing us to get credit. But I'm not going to drop my rate of glyphosate or Roundup or Liberty glufosinate type products. You don't. That is not what this is about. Okay. Run the sound program. Resistance is just as big an issue as regulations. Okay. But you got credit for windbreaks. I highlight this bottom one in red because this is really relevant to us. We have small fields with lots of trees and stuff around our fields. Forest, shrubland, greater than 60 foot, 2x boom height. Again, it's downwind, so that downwind changes by day. but the potential there is 100% reduction. And again, they got that right. And then I'll remind you, this is not all of the options to manage areas adjacent to the treated field. This should not be new to you if you're an in-crop dicamba user in the past. We can use ag fields, roads, grassy areas, field borders to count that as part of our buffer. So if we got a 25 or 50 feet buffer, many, not all, of course, we have roads and grassy areas around our fields to get the equipment in. So again, something to think about. Now, let me say one other thing before I move into my last topic real quick. All right, so each manufacturer, and you're getting ready to hear from one in a minute, each manufacturer has an opportunity to adjust these potential flexible options for us, right? So I'll give you an example. So you got herbicide strategy that has shared the potential options in the calculator for runoff, and I've just shared you the potential options we have to reduce drifts. The manufacturer's in the middle, right? It's their label, and then we get their product. They have the opportunity to potentially adjust some of that. Now, I'm guessing, because I'm not a manufacturer, I don't think anybody touches the calculator. That's awesome. That's the EPA's done that. But I think the manufacturers, some of the manufacturers do touch some of the drift credits. I just gave you an example of it. And I'll give you an example. I think some labels will come out and say they require you to have a 24-inch boom height, or they require you to do that low boom, right? They don't give you the flexibility you can do low boom or high boom. Some products will probably let you do low boom or high boom and you figure it out, but be prepared. We have to look at the label and see how we get there. I like 24 inches above target. I just showed you that improves pest management, that improves coverage, that reduces drift out of the field, that reduces me having to get between two farmers that I love to death that aren't happy with one another because they drifted, right? So again, be aware the manufacturer can influence that, and that can be influenced by product. So we'll have to be prepared for that as we move forward. Last thing I'm gonna say, then I'm gonna shut up. All right, so one of the things that has been essentially important in our work, and the reason we actually started 3 years ago, we woke up, we had an Enlist Duo label where the restrictions removed that product from 11 Georgia counties. And in Enlist Duo, the active ingredients are glyphosate and 2,4-D, very important chemistry to our farmers. That restriction was a countywide restriction where we lost 951,557 acres where we could not use that tool in corn, cotton, or soybeans, all right? We did that to protect a salamander species. However, the more we looked at it, we couldn't understand because salamander species really are not in our fields. So how are we threatening the salamander species? Working with the Fish and Wildlife, working with EPA, working with farmers, we remapped the process. We remapped where the species was using historical information, kind of in the middle of this black slide here. And you can see we went from 951,000 down to 69,000 that we needed to do some kind of mitigation. Then we said, let's get creative. Fish and Wildlife's amazing. They're awesome. Love working with them. Let's create a new map based on latest science of the species habitat. Lo and behold, we further reduced that, right? Now, this concept is basically pretty simple. If you're going to regulate us, you should take the effort to know where the species is at, know where our fields are at, and know where the overlap of where we treat a pesticide and these species are at, right? We can at least ask for the science behind that. Well, the cool thing, and it just happened, is the US EPA, it's not exactly the same as the program we did in Georgia, but the concept is there. They're taking that mapping approach concept nationally, right? So the effort to better understand where these species are at, better understand how they potentially overlap with us, will influence the pull up on BLT, that PULA, that area. Hopefully we've got less avoidance, right? Hopefully we can work on that. We got to work on that, but hopefully we have less additional restrictions to it, right? So this is a big deal. The EPA did this in warp speed when considering a regulator, and they're doing it cooperating with all kinds of entities. It is a wonderful sight to see the cooperation, and it's clearly the key to our success. Now, again, I'm an optimist. I feel like we've got a lot of opportunity. So my take-home message, when it comes to runoff, I think advisors, well, really when it comes to everything, I think advisors are the key to ESA. Our farmers have too much on their plate. We need to take the burden off of them. We need to help them. Some of these younger farmers now, they're going to be in the middle of this stuff. They love this stuff, but we need to be there if they need us. The calculator is the key for you and I as an advisor for runoff. There's no doubt. I can't wait to see the next calculator 2.0. There is supposedly a drift calculator being developed. I have not seen it, so I do not know. For each and every one of you, we need you to help us identify issues, challenges, and errors. I told you I have some production scenarios I can't get my guys to 9. So do I need to help them implement strategies to better keep the tool on the field, or more likely, are they already implementing strategies I'm not familiar with, and I need to develop the science to bring that to the calculator, right? So help us identify that, help us identify anything else that's confusing. We have time for 2025, as far as I know, herbicide-wise. You got Liberty Ultra requirements. You can learn about that in just a second. You got Enlist 1 requirements. You got Enlist Duo requirements. I don't see anything on those labels that are going to prohibit their use in the state of Georgia, other than that one avoidance area where you can't use any of those 3 products. I am hoping there's an EPA webinar in March. A lot of things are going on with the current political atmosphere, but I'm hoping there's one there. If it is, and you're an advisor, I would strongly encourage you to attend. If you're a farmer, maybe not your thing, but if you're into this stuff, you might want to hear from the EPA. And then I'm gonna finish up with something I think is very important, and it's not talked about enough, right? We have a responsibility as pesticide applicators to do our parts. Think about today when you're driving around, if you lost all of these tools. How would we survive on the farm? How would we feed the world? Our science says you can't do it in large scale agriculture. Science says that, all right? So we have to do our part and steward these tools. That means resistance management, that means on target application. So we have to take it upon ourselves to do our part to protect our toolbox. With that said, I am completed, so I'm going to turn it back over to Tracy, you guys.
Great, thank you, Dr. Culpepper. I'm going to actually hand it over to Gary.
All right, thank you, Tracy. Let's see, I guess Heather, I'm not sure if I can share yet.
Yeah, I'm working on it, Gary, for some reason.
All right, well, hey, I'll just introduce myself here. My name is Gary Schmitz. I'm the Regional Tech Service Manager for BASF in the Midwest. So I guess maybe this was done by design. I didn't realize it, but we had somebody kind of more representing the Southeast, that perspective, and then I'm in the Midwest. So I'll probably have a little bit of an angle towards maybe Midwestern, agriculture and the fields in the Midwest. So Heather, is it available yet or not?
That's not working. Stanley, could you try to stop sharing? Oh, wait, let's do this. Okay, here we go.
I think we got it working right now. I'm going to go to my slide, and Tracy, can you see my slide up?
We are good. You're just going to
great. Okay, so I'd like to really thank Dr. Culpepper. That was an excellent overview of the new herbicide strategy from the EPA. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go from the big picture and just focus specifically on how the strategy impacts Liberty Ultra and the Liberty Ultra label. And actually, Liberty Ultra is a really good product to learn on, because it's designated as a low risk for both spray drift and for runoff by the EPA. So the requirements are a little bit lower than some of the ones that Dr. Culpepper's already outlined, kind of that big picture. And so I'm going to jump into, those 3 requirements. And the first one, mine may be in a different order than what Dr. Culpepper had here earlier, but spray drift mitigation. Okay, again, considered low risk for spray drift. There's a 10-foot downwind buffer for ground applications, and then there's a 50-foot downwind buffer for aerial applications. So, obviously more for aerial applications, but to tell you the truth, I prefer that aerial applications do not go out. And I think, 99% of our applications or more will be ground. So I will focus on the ground, buffer. And so it's 10 foot. And so not largely restrictive at all. But one of the good things is, was already outlined, is a lot of those managed areas can be included as your downwind buffer. So it can be considered your downwind buffer. And, crop fields, so, doesn't matter what trait that's in, those crop fields have been planted, can be considered downwind buffer, bare ground, pasture, mowed grass areas. So, like a mowed ditch bank, even a farmyard, roads, hedge roads, rows, CRP, forested strips that are high enough to be a windbreak can be considered part of your downwind buffer. And, you know, if you're in an agricultural area, like particularly in the Midwest, you know, where I am from, most of your fields are surrounded by one of these types of areas. So if you have this downwind, that can be considered as your downwind buffer, and you may not need to have an infield buffer at all if you have this downwind. So that actually makes it very manageable from, you know, the Liberty Ultra perspective. The second one is runoff mitigation, and that's already been outlined. Liberty, being again low risk, only requires 3 mitigation points. Okay, and as what was already mentioned earlier, if you just track those points, you get 1 point for that. So you only need an additional 2 points to get to those 3 points. And you know, the counties have a categorized by their runoff vulnerability, anywhere from very low to high. And if you're in that very low to medium, you're going to get anywhere from 6 to 2 points for just having your field in those counties. And right here, I've got the state of Nebraska outlined, and this came off of the EPA website showing the various different counties. So it's maybe not quite as clear as maybe I'd like, but Nebraska has all 4 of those different categories of counties in that state. And if you're in one of those counties, anywhere from medium to very low, you get 2 to 6 points. You write that down. In those counties, you're already done for meeting the requirements for Liberty Ultra because you've got 3 or more points at that point in time. But if you're one of those counties that's highlighted here in green, or someplace else that is considered high runoff vulnerability and you don't automatically get those points, there are a lot of ways, which have already been outlined, that you can get those points to get to that 3. And I think one of the big ones in the Midwest would be non-irrigated. I think, you know, probably 90% of our fields are dry land that do not have irrigation. You can get 3 points for that. And in a lot of cases, you're getting points for conservation practices that you're already implementing, such as no-till 3 points, reduced tillage or strip tillage, you get 2 points for that. So very easy to get to those 3. And if you're on a very, you know, a relatively flat field of less than 3%, there's 2 points there. And then we talked a little bit about those sandy soils getting 2 points. So a lot of ways that I don't have here, but I think this would cover, you know, well over 90% of the fields to get to that 3 point required minimum that we need at that point, you know, for Liberty Ultra. And then lastly, you need to check that Bulletins Live 2 website. And you know, Dr. Culpepper already kind of talked in detail about that, but you need to look for those pesticide use limitation areas, or PULAs. And for Liberty Ultra, there's 3 areas listed specifically for Liberty Ultra. They're all in the southeast. You know, I think Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama. They encompass less than 2,000 acres. And so that's what's on there right now. And in fact, you know, you need to check this 6 months prior to application, and most of our Liberty Ultra applications are going to be targeted somewhere in that May and June timeline. So we could check in the next couple months and be able to have that requirement done right away. And so I do want to point out that there is more information on the Liberty Ultra label. So, you know, definitely read and follow all the directions that are on the label. Plus, you know, as Dr. Culpepper's already said, there's a lot of great information on the EPA website. And I think the question that we get the most are definitions, you know, of what can be considered the downwind buffer, definitions of, you know, what is considered, you know, these credits for mitigation. And that is outlined really well, either in the tracking tool, or just going to the website. Those definitions are there and they're explained really well. So I really just want to point that out. And so if you look at what we've got for Liberty Ultra, spray drift mitigation, runoff mitigation, checking the Bulletin Live 2, those are all, you know, not real complicated to get to what we need to hit that mitigation. And so at that point, I think we got some time here for some questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Tracy. So thank you very much for the time today.
Great, thanks, Gary. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to enter it you'll see the tool on the right-hand side, and we'll address those as they come up. We do have a couple that have been entered so far. Dr. Culpepper, are you able to join us again? There he is, perfect. You're muted, just so that you're aware on that front.
Okay, you can't hear me?
I got you now. Perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
Technology
So yeah,
is not my friend.
Please feel free to enter your questions and we'll certainly address them. We don't have too many yet, but just from a definition standpoint, so boom height, do we measure that from the ground or the crop canopy?
Okay, so I'll go first and then Gary can go. My interpretation will be it's 24 inches above the target. So hopefully the labels will define that for us, but where I'm sitting today, 24 inches above the target. So if we're doing a pre-emergence herbicide application, then we're at 24 inches. If we got a 12-inch cotton crop, 12 plus 24, that's where the boom height would be. So 24 inches above the target is where we would get that enormous credit for it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That's generally how we measure things, is from the target.
Yeah, and I'll just say one thing that Gary didn't do that I really like on their label. Again, they made it a requirement for Liberty Ultra to be at 24 inches. But what they also did is they allowed us to take the medium droplet. So we got the credit for the 24 inches. They gave up the credit to let us have medium. And the reason they let us have the medium is because we need a medium droplet to kill pigweed in our part of the world, right? So again, that's where the manufacturer can help us on the farm by manipulating some of the flexibilities to improve the activity of their product, right? So that is an important component that will vary product by product, I think. If the manufacturer is smart about it, it'll help us.
Great, thank you. Next question for you, Dr. Culpepper. Do you make any recommendations or have any recommendations for ways to document the mitigation points determined for a field?
Yeah, so in my state, that handout that you saw, I actually have a 3-page handout. Page 1 is exactly what you saw. That's for them to scribble on during the meeting. They have a copy of that to carry home in the back. They can take my copy. They can create their own. You can do anything that you want to do, as long as you can provide that information to the state regulatory group. In the state of Georgia, that'd be the Georgia Department of Agriculture. I am blessed with a phenomenal Department of Agriculture. I'll just mention the other day, they were with me in public and they said compliance assistance. That is so wonderful. I hope you're in a state like mine and your Department of Agriculture has the same thoughts and ideas. But as long as you can provide that information to them when they show up, if they show up, it's up to you. But that's what we're providing with our growers is those handouts. But again, there's no requirement on that. You're not even required to do it. We just want that one point that Gary talked about for mitigation tracking. So that's why I give them the sheet. Write it down and get your extra point.
Great, thank you. Sorry, they're coming in fast and furious now. So there was one comment about the Bulletins Live 2 website being clunky on a mobile device, and we do recognize that that is a limitation. I know that there have been advocates to have all of the tools that the EPA has developed in a centralized location, so those discussions are happening with the EPA. Unfortunately, there are no known apps. Dr. Culpepper, correct me if I am wrong on that.
So that's really interesting because I am pushing my friends at the EPA very hard to get us an app. So what I don't want, and I begged, and our manufacturers are really participating, we don't need 40 calculators, right? We don't need BASF with a calculator, Syngenta with a calculator, corn growers with a calculator, soybean growers. So we have tried to work together saying we need one calculator. That should be the EPA. At the same time, we need them to move that to a better platform, right? So what I am pushing very, very hard, many like me are pushing very hard. So that would be something, if you're part of the regulatory, partnership on here, that would be something that they need to hear from us. So share that. I think the opportunity is there. I think we've got some neat ideas to improve it and to bring it to you in a better platform. I agree with you 100% with BLT. BLT drives me nuts. It's got to get better, but we have to collectively push to make it better. But thank you for making that point, because that is something very important. Everybody, please make that point everywhere you go.
So Tracy, there's a question on there about the Liberty Ultra label. and there's an error in the label on the rate of the oil emulsion DRA for ground application. And it's on the label, but when the label was created for us by the EPA to put that section on the Liberty Ultra label, they unfortunately put the aerial rate of 2.5%, which makes it really unusable for a ground application right now. And so that's why I didn't even talk about using a DRA to help reduce the downwind buffer, is because of the error that's on the label. But just to let you know, we have submitted to get that fixed on the label and to get the rate corrected. May not make it for the 25 season, so it may be 26 before we get that correction on there.
And I'll highlight as a scientist, that's one of the areas we definitely need to focus some attention on, right? Which product does what, you know, what rates and stuff like that. So there's so many areas for us to continue to work on and to improve. So I just wanted to point that out. That is definitely one that we've got to highlight.
Okay, another one here. Sorry, I'm just jumping around here as they come in, but do you have any recommendation for commercial applicators when considering compliance with the label and planning applications with growers?
So read that for me one more time, if that's
any recommendations for commercial applicators when considering compliance with the label and planning applications with growers?
Yeah, my recommendation for you is to start now. Spend an hour in the calculator, you'll become an expert. Once you develop the calculator, you're comfortable what works for your grower, you know, as that scenario. Then you can be an advisor for that grower. So I really think my recommendation to you, everybody is staying far away from this. This is overwhelming, it's too big, and they're not diving into it. If you will dive into it, you will see the opportunity for you to help your farmers and your other pesticide applicators is monumental. So I really think that's the key. Once you get organized, once you understand the calculator, you've got the runoff, then spend some time on the Liberty Ultra label, and then spend some time, you know, just thinking about the drift things that I shared today. It's all about knowledge and creativity. If you have the knowledge, you have the creativity, you already understand what's happening on the farm, you'll be able to connect those dots. And I'm telling you, you will not only change the game, helping them get the points they need, but I hope you'll also help them improve on target applications. That's the big picture. The big picture is let's help and work together to put products on target. So that's what I would suggest to you. Obviously, go to meetings like this or your local meetings. Weed scientists all over the country are talking about this, so you'll learn more by engagement and stuff like that. But suck the knowledge in, and then the bottom line is do one for a farm. You know, I learned more doing Culpepper farms than I've learned anywhere else, right? So do a farm, and then once you get in there, you can outline the questions, and we can help you with those questions.
So question, I think we can sort of talk high level to this, but does the EPA have any intention of going back and reviewing previously registered products and adding mitigation requirements, or will it be limited only to newly registered products?
Well, Gary knows better than I do, but I think where I'm sitting today, what I have been taught is every product that's registered or reviewed, re-registered through the process will address this. So I think that's the ultimate goal, right? We basically every product will get there, but it will take some time. Is that a 15-year process? We'll have to wait and see. But Gary, you can certainly add more to that.
No, you're exactly right. Every new product will go through this that gets registered. So anything that comes down the road, but we're in the process of re-registering our old products too. And as that process happens, you know, they're going to go under the same requirements of this new herbicide strategy. So you'll see that for every product eventually down the road.
So the question,
it's important to stress for this year, this is our learning year. This is our identifying where there are problems year. Let's get the science where we've got a problem and we need science. It takes us time to generate the science. So help us identify what needs to be improved so we can get the science started so it doesn't miss a lot of our important products, because we have some very important products that are queuing up to come through, right? Very important products.
No, it's a great call out. And I don't know if this is a question or a request perhaps, but the worksheet that you referred to that you used, Dr. Culpepper, have you provided that to other extension agents in other states?
Oh, any of my slides, any of my stuff. And again, I have that worksheet. I have a specific one depending on which farmer I'm going to talk to, right? If I'm talking to plasticulture, it's one thing. If it's, bare ground, conventional vegetables or sweet potato or something like that, it's different. So I have a different one, but anybody can have any of my stuff at any time. Just send me an email. I'll send you whatever I got. I want us to help our farms. Our farms are in trouble. We all know that. We've got to come together to remove the burden from our family farms. And so anything I can help you do, you're welcome to anything I have.
So Tracy, there's a question on tank mixing Liberty Ultra with Enlist One. That doesn't have to do with the ESA, but it has to do with the tank mix website. And right now we have on the Corteva website for Enlist One, it says you need to use MSO or high load MSO for that oil in a tank mix of Liberty Ultra with Enlist One. Tracy, there's also a question about this this webinar, whether it's going to be recorded and available for people to access later.
Yeah, I saw that. Thanks, Gary. So we will actually email out to you, those in attendance, a recording of this webinar, and we will also post it with BASF through our YouTube channels and other avenues that we have available. So we will make sure that this is widely available to the community at large. Question here, when we're looking at leased land, does the responsibility for compliance lie on the landowner or renter?
So Gary, I don't know, I'll go first and then you can go. To me, it's the applicator, right? So the applicator is responsible to make sure they follow the compliance on the label. So this is complicated. So let's think about runoff, and I'm just thinking about our farm. If I lease a farm and I'm the one on the sprayer applying the product, it's my responsibility to make sure I have the number for runoff. Let's say worst case scenario, 9 points, all right? It's my responsibility to make sure I meet that 9 points before I apply that product. If I don't do that, that's my responsibility. Now, let's say we need to put waterways in, right? This is more complicated because now I'm leasing the land. How much money am I going to invest in putting a waterway in or a terrace, right? So that's where this part becomes complicated, and then the landowner and you as a leaser, the conversation has to occur. But to answer your question, in my opinion, it's the applicator. It's my responsibility as the applicator to make sure I can fulfill the requirements on that label when I apply that product. Gary, did I miss something?
No, that's correct. The applicator is always responsible for following the label. This is all part of the label, but it does require a conversation with the landowner. I mean, my mother, 86 years old, she knows nothing about anything on the application, and she's in a crop share agreement. She's considered a farmer, and literally it has to be the applicator because you can't expect her to be the one that's doing all the compliance measures.
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that. Gary, do you see anything else that we haven't covered yet in some context? I think most of the topics we've gotten to here. Okay. Oh, there's one here. So in checking Bulletins Live 2 today, do I need to put in every AI registration number, or can I just look at the application month to see if there is a PULA?
I think just looking at that right now, Liberty Ultra is the only one that, well, maybe Enlist One has that requirement to check it. So you don't need to put in all the products you're spraying, only the ones that have that requirement of checking the PULA. So yes, you will need to go product by product that do have that requirement. And I had that in my slide. I had the registration number for Liberty Ultra. And so you'll need to put that in there specifically, and it will tell you what what the limitations are for that exact AI and product.
I'll add one thing. That is one of the concerns that my growers have. I'm actually on my survey, I'm asking my grower, are you planning to go in and check this? Do you want extension to go in and check this for you? And you can imagine extension is very common. So hopefully the advisor list, we can work together to try to, because BLT needs improvement. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, even our friends at a regulatory. But start getting comfortable with it while we try to figure out a better approach to communicate more effectively. Again, if you're in the state of Georgia, we're gonna work out something where we can communicate this stuff with you. We have to do it within basically 6 months of that application, but that's not that hard for us to overcome. So hopefully, collectively, the ag advisors over time can help simplify this process, and the EPA makes the BLT program much more user friendly. I mean, that's obviously got to be required if they expect us to go. If this is an extension of the label and we're required to understand it, there is some part where they have to make sure we can obtain the information.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We're at the top of the hour. So I just want to thank all of our attendees for joining us here for this past hour. My language is leaving me now at this point, so I'm glad it's Friday. But just thank you to Dr. Culpepper for being willing to put on this presentation. Thank you, Gary, for covering the Liberty Ultra requirements. A recording of this will be available. Encourage you, there are a lot of resources available through the EPA websites, whether it's definitions of mitigation actions and things like that. Please take a look at it. As Dr. Culpepper mentioned, it takes about an hour and you'll be considered pretty knowledgeable in this space. So thank you everyone for your time. Have a great rest of your Friday and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.